Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the real side of wrestling. I am your host, the main event referee, John Gray, and I have got a great show planned for you guys tonight. I'm so excited to have this guest on, mainly because I have recently found a new respect for Combat Zone Wrestling. While I've always enjoyed watching the stuff that they have put on, even more so recently in the new DJ Hyde era, I am noticing a lot more psychology and a lot more wrestling being integrated with their ultra-violent past as well. So without further ado, joining me right now is probably one of the most recognizable Combat Zone and international sensations right now, Mr. Danny Havoc. Danny, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, no problem, man. International sensation, I like that, man. We should work on.
Well, you spent time in Germany, you've done time in Japan, and
I moved around a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all of that coming up here. So let's get right into this. I always tell the people when they first come on my show, nobody ever wakes up one day and decides, I think I'm going to go take some body slams today. So what what made you get into pro wrestling in the first place?
I'm not sure exactly what the trigger was specifically. I know when I was a kid, unlike most of my contemporaries, I didn't like wrestling at all. I was not interested in it. I always have a sort of a schism with my buddy Drake about that, where he always talks about, growing up, don't you remember the great moments where Hogan would do this or Macho Man would do that? And I'm like, no, man, I didn't watch that. I don't remember those moments. I'm sorry. And he's very disappointed in me for this, but it is what it is, I really didn't like wrestling, and then, I don't know, somewhere along the line, I think my dad hired this guy to come work for us on the farm, and he was really into wrestling, and I was at that sort of impressionable age, and neither of us really wanted to do the work we were assigned to do, so we both ended up roughhousing, and that became, that ended up being backyard wrestling after a while. That's sort of what it mutated into, and then I got really into hardcore and ECW, and then Japanese wrestling and all this sort of stuff. So that's kind of how I found my calling to be a fucking idiot who falls on sharp stuff. Wait, I can swear on this, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Right.
Sure.
Well,
we're not regulated by the FCC or.
Yeah, I had to do some little brief interview with like Maven and DJ years ago. It was something that was, I don't know, it was broadcast out of a collectible and comic and card toy shop in Philadelphia, and they just wanted to like do a half-hour little program to hype up something for CZW, and I ended up nursing a blue streak and then finding out that was unacceptable, and the guy got kicked off the air. So I figured I should make sure up front.
No, you're absolutely fine. We do not care if you curse. Just stay away from the GD word if you don't care. Other than that, I don't care what you say. So what year was it that you actually broke into wrestling?
What year?
Yeah.
Let's see. I moved to the East Coast in 2004, and I believe July of 2005, I made my professional debut in a Royal Rumble type deathmatchy kind of thing at TOD, I want to say 4.
Okay. All right. So you actually got trained by a plethora, who's who, I guess, of pro wrestling. Chris Hero, Mike Quackenbush, and DJ Hyde. Is that correct?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people I could list as trainers, but I'd go through like brief periods with all of them, and then there would be some sort of upheaval where suddenly, everything would change. So, on one hand, it was really good for me because I got a lot of differing viewpoints on how wrestling should be, which I think gave me a little more well-rounded perspective. But on the other hand, it was very difficult to follow a set coursework because it would change. You know what I mean? Like when I got there, DJ and John Dahmer were in charge of the school, but then within like 5-6 months, then guys like Sabian and that had a lot of influence, and then they merged with Chikara briefly. So Chris Hero and Mike Clackenbush became the head trainers, and they'd bring in all kinds of like guest tutors and everything. But then that obviously couldn't work for too long because John Zandig didn't get along with anyone for more than a few months. So then they had another little schism there, and so we didn't train with them anymore. And then it was sort of a free for all. I mean, it was like it was hard to sort of follow a set coursework, but at the same time, it was interesting because you got a lot of different perspectives on how things should be done. You know.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Do you think that you mentioned earlier that you did some backyard wrestling? Do you think that kind of helped you out when you started doing your legit training, or do you think it made things harder?
Well, in the long run, it's probably detrimental because I'm certain that I've probably if you add everything up and you're able to do this like mathematically, like my knees probably have a solid 3 or 4 fewer years than they ought to, due strictly to like the backyard stuff and jumping out of haylofts and nonsense like that. Mm-hmm. So like in the long run, it probably wasn't great for me, but in the short run, I feel like I came into professional wrestling largely knowing how to execute the moves and just not knowing how to string them together or make a match or sell. Like the thing. Those are the things that you learn. I mean, you can watch wrestling on television of any variety, and if you're of the mind to try it, you can learn to execute the moves, and that's what I did in backyard. That's what a lot of people do in backyard, and I think that was positive for me. You know what I mean? Because I came in having a pretty good idea of what we were doing and how to take a bump and stuff. It's just like there's so much other stuff that you don't think about when you're doing backyard. You're just trying to like emulate the moves of the people you've seen. You don't think about like where the move might make sense or like how to put a good match together or how to get the crowd, to the right level of dramatic tension, et cetera, Mm-hmm. That's what you learn in school more than just the moves themselves,
Right.
And you learn it kind of in the ring too, because even when you learn, they'll teach as much as they can, but you're still going to go out there and put on, unless you're absolutely incredible born talent, you were meant to do this from the second you came out of the womb, you're probably going to go out there and have at least a year's worth of real shit matches, because it takes time to come up with like, the sort of the balance where you understand how to put this stuff together,
Right. Absolutely. That's a very good point, because, I don't think a lot of people really think of it in quite that aspect of things. Now, you actually moved to New Jersey from, of all places, Iowa. That had to be like a real culture shock for you.
Definitely. Well, of all places, but I didn't have a choice. I mean, I just sort of was born there, and what can you do?
Well, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just when you think of Iowa, you think of kind of like cornrows and just really nothing much really happening.
Pretty much it. I mean, like, give me one other example, because when
Iowa Hawkeyes,
anybody mentions, okay, all right, Hawkeyes is good. That's good. Yeah, let's go Hawkeyes.
Okay. My little brother, actually, Austin Gray, played his freshman year out there, and unfortunately. Then he dropped out of school like a retard, but I love you, Austin.
At least he was a Hawkeye for 1 year,
Yeah,
that's something you can claim till he dies. That's awesome.
That's it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an incredible culture shock, because I moved from a very small, well, I didn't even live in town. I lived out on a farm, but I mean, the town that I attended school in and, bought our groceries and shit was extremely small, sheltered, rural, largely Lutheran Catholic, which means Scandinavian/Irish town. Really no diversity to the ethnicities, or aside from the schism between Lutherans and Catholics, really no religious diversity. Just nothing that would give you any sort of a sense of well-roundedness in terms of the way of the world. And then I just picked up and took off and ended up in New Jersey, which by and large is a shithole, but I've really come to love it because it's a shithole in its own unique character-driven way, and it's pretty goddamn wonderful if you can look at it. Well, I don't know. It's pretty terrible too, but I enjoy it. I enjoy myself here.
Well, that's all that really matters. I have actually only had one experience in Jersey, and fuck your airport. I swear to God, I will never threaten terroristic things on an airport because I don't want to go to jail, but I will never again fly through the Newark, New Jersey airport because it really sucks balls.
Not great. I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, the world, it's got to be, and I've been in a lot of airports, it's got to be the worst one I've ever been in. From Atlanta to LAX to Chicago, yeah, it's definitely the worst.
Damning commentary by John Gray here. Newark Airport, not getting high marks, huh? Nah, it's pretty shit. My grandparents had a flight into Newark and it got like delayed, and so they put them up in a hotel till the next day. Ended up like some junkie like banging on their door and trying to like ask them to borrow money at like 4 a.m, and they ended up like having to barricade themselves inside with a like the dresser and the TV stand because they were so concerned that he'd come back and like kick through the chain. So not the greatest place in the world, but it's got its own charm.
Wow. I would like to real quickly throw this out there. This is actually from somebody in the chat room, but they want you to know that this is weird and it's to the death.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, obviously. Thank you for that insightful commentary from in the chat room.
Do you know who that is?
I have my suspicions.
Please enlighten us with your ideas.
Would that be one Billy Cursemaster Graham?
No. It would be one Mr. Insanity, Toby Klein.
Oh, really? Toby Klein gets on the chat rooms.
Yeah, Toby and Nicole are actually two of my most loyal listeners. That was why it was
unexpected for me. I didn't know. I figured. Billy was he's the voice of cult fiction, so I assumed he and I know that he puts long involved tirades on message boards from time to time, so I figured that was probably. Well, hey Toby, how you doing, brother? I miss you.
Billy's great, and Toby says hi. Yeah, Billy's great. He was one of my favorite interviews by far. Very, very insightful. Not quite what I was expecting from Billy Graham after all the stories that I'd been told from yourself and Drake and of course the late great J.C. Bailey. You hear so many stories you don't really know what to expect, and then here he is. So it was actually pretty cool.
If you give him a venue, he will talk.
Absolutely.
Talk, so you are probably dead and gone, but he'll keep talking.
Let's talk about another one of my favorite stars out right now, and you actually had a really good feud with him. I think it culminated at Cage of Death 11, and that was with Mr. Sammy Callahan. What was that like working with Sammy? I call him Mr. Intensity because I have yet to meet another worker that is as intense in the ring as this guy is.
Yeah, I don't know. I presume, mind you, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I have no doctorate to back up my theories here, but I presume Sammy must have some sort of disorder, something along the lines of ADHD, but not quite that. Like something that gives him just a ridiculous amount of like energy and drive and focus for like wrestling and pretty much nothing else. Because he can't remember from his house to like the bar to like bring his ID. That's too much for him. But if you put a match, I mean, this is verbatim. He's just we got to the gas station. He's like, "Oh man, I left all my shit at home." I'm like, "Really? That was the whole plan. We're going to the bar." Anyway, but you put a match together with him. He's got 8 million ideas, and he never gets winded. And I do not understand it. And I go to the gym with him sometimes, and he smokes weed before he goes to the gym. And I can't possibly smoke weed before I go. I can drink before I go to the gym. It's not a good idea, but I do it sometimes. But if I smoke weed, I'm done for the day. I'm sitting